Veronica presents Chapter 3 of the A.I. Repertory Theatre's production of By Night They Creep by Hugh B. Cave, Horror Stories, February 1935.
Chapter 3. The Dead Return. That evening, when Paul Lawton climbed the steps of the Graham home and thumbed the bell, his nerves were ragged, and he wondered if he had any right even to think of keeping his date with Lois. During the past hour, he had unceasingly paced the floor of his bedroom at home, fighting the torment of his swollen arm. Time and again, he had studied his gaunt face in the mirror, and at times the face that stared back at him had seemed to be turning green. That could be nothing but imagination. Waiting now for the door of the Graham home to open, he cursed himself for a fool. As a matter of fact, he felt physically better than he had felt last night after being attacked by the thing in the swamp. The swelling in his arm had gone down. Mrs. Graham, Lois's mother, opened the door to him, and he stepped inside.
I don't understand you young people.
She smiled vaguely and shook her head.
How can you go off to a dance and make merry at a time like this? I don't know.
Lois was ready, and when she came from the living room, Lawton felt his heart jump with appreciation of her loveliness. She smiled, came toward him, and took his arm. She wore a gown of white satin, cut in a manner which in Rillwood might be considered daring. In the living room doorway, her cousin Vincent stood gawking at her. Not until Lawton had turned to escort the girl to the door did he notice the expression on Vincent's face. He stopped, blinked his eyes to make sure he was not mistaken. There was a stiff hostility about that face that startled him. Its eyes were narrowed. They were the eyes of a jealous animal. The boy's lips were tight-pressed, bloodless. He breathed heavily through quivering nostrils. Yet he merely stared, made no comment. Outside, Lawton said quietly,
I don't think your cousin likes me.
Lois glanced at him queerly.
He hasn't been himself since he came back from the swamp. I suppose it's natural after what happened.
She was silent as she got into the car. Then vaguely,
Father says Ralph Kinney is seriously ill. He suffered a terrible shock. He was so in love with his wife.
At the dance, Lawton did not enjoy himself. He was not well, and soon realized the futility of trying to think otherwise. The Owl Head Inn, 10 miles from Rillwood on the main highway to Norton, was a small place, dimly lighted and seductively attractive. He knew everyone there and sensed an undercurrent of uneasiness that lay beneath the gay surface of merriment. Already the news of the Blackwater Swamp horror had stalked the countryside. Fear of the green plague hung like a black shroud wherever people assembled. When 1 o'clock came and Lois said quietly,
I think we'd better go.
He was glad enough to leave. The effort of continuous dancing had weakened him. He felt sluggish and heavy. The blood in his veins had thickened. But on the way home, he turned the car into one of their favorite haunts, a side road where the moon was visible through sweet-scented pines. And dimming the lights, he relaxed in the seat.
I'm dog-tired, darling,
He mumbled.
I don't know why, but I am.
You've had a hard day.
She drew his head down gently, and a queer lassitude stole over him. Unconsciously, he turned his head so that she might kiss him. When she did not, he was disappointed. He opened his eyes, looked up at her in bewilderment. She was staring with an intentness that frightened him. She sat stiffly erect, her hands against the seat cushion, her arms rigid. If ever he had seen fear in a woman's face, it was in hers at that moment. He strained upward.
Lois, what's wrong?
She held her breath, shrank from his nearness. Perspiration dampened her forehead, and she was terrifyingly pale.
Don't touch me.
She gasped.
Take me home. Please.
But what's wrong? What have I done?
Please take me home, Paul.
He did not understand, and it occurred to him that she might be ill. She was not well, and she was frightened. What else could it be? He made haste to turn the car around, and was thankful that at this time of night there would be no traffic. In 10 minutes, they could be in Rillwood. Twice he turned his head to glance into the girl's face, but she had nothing to say. She had drawn herself as far from him as possible and was staring straight ahead through the windshield. Mechanically, he glanced up into the mirror. Then he knew. Black fear surged through him, and a shriek jangled in his throat. The face in the mirror was a gaunt, hollow-cheeked horror, colored a sickly green. It had bulging green eyes, a livid mouth in which teeth gleamed as though freshly calcimined. The face was not his, yet it was. He gaped at it in shuddering terror. Then, with a convulsive jerk, he lowered his head and stared at his hands on the wheel. They, too, were faintly green. He had forgotten that he was driving the car. Momentarily out of control, the machine careened across the road. The lash of the wheel in Lawton's hands as the car struck the soft road shoulder brought him back from a dark world of soul-numbing terror. He jerked the wheel, straightened the machine out barely in time. Then, because his body was a limp, sweat-drenched thing that had no strength, he drove more slowly, forced himself to concentrate on the task of steering. There was no need for haste. Lois was not ill. She was merely horrified by what she had seen when she looked into his face. He was the one who was ill. And for him, there was no hope. Jonathan Graham had said that without meaning to. The green plague was a hideous, death-dealing disease that defied analysis. There was no cure. Terror was a cold thing in Lawton's heart by the time he lurched to a stop in front of the Graham home. He did not dare look again into the mirror and instinctively avoided glancing down at his hands. He knew now the explanation of the strange lassitude that had stolen over him. He was ill, terribly ill. It was an effort for him to get out of the car. He wondered why lights were glowing at this hour behind drawn window shades in the Graham parlor. Wearily, he opened the car door for Lois to get out. When she turned to say goodnight, he cut her short, hoarsely.
I've got to see your father.
Then another thought, most horrible of all, stabbed his brain, and he gazed at the girl in utter terror.
And you've got to see him, too. You've been near me all night. My God, if this green horror is contagious.
The girl's face lost color. She clutched his arm, then realized the danger and snatched her hand away.
Paul, what can we do?
Tears gleamed in her eyes.
What can anyone do?
I don't know.
She used her own key to open the door, and with an effort, he followed her over the threshold. Voices came droningly from the parlor. The girl paced forward, stopped abruptly when she reached the parlor doorway. The voices ceased. Lawton, forcing himself forward, felt suddenly that he was going to faint. The warmth of the house had watered his blood, put a dull ringing sensation in his brain. He reached the doorway and stared into the room beyond, but the room was a vast gray blur. Only vaguely was he conscious that the blur contained many human shapes. He stood swaying, his hands gripping the sides of the door frame. Out of the room's grayness, a familiar shape strode toward him, and a throaty voice rasped,
"Lawton, what's the matter?"
But the shape and the face that belonged to it were haloed in the red mist of Lawton's agony. The green horror had at last reached the pain centers of his diseased body. The pain began in his chest and ate upward, crawled like a monstrous maggot through his arteries. When it reached his skull, it festered there, became a bloated, growing thing that sought to escape through his eyes and nose and mouth. His brain swelled. He had seen a human brain once in a jar of preservatives. Through a black winding sheet of terror, a hideous thought came to him that his own brain was that brain. His skull, the jar. In a moment, the jar would burst. He thought that he screamed, but was not sure. Strong hands had seized his shoulders, were pulling him forward over the threshold and forcing him into a chair. He gripped the chair arms, and his clawing fingers dug through the mohair covering. His mouth was open. Blood-flecked saliva drooled down his chin and slopped on his coat. Then something snapped, gave way inside the monstrous ball of agony that had been his head. He was no longer sitting in a chair with Lois and Jonathan Graham and the others crowding around him. He was standing in a black cone of darkness whose gleaming walls rushed in upon him. His rigid body spun round and round, fantastically. When he moaned dully and forced his eyes open, Jonathan Graham was still standing over him, and in the doctor's hands lay a small brown bottle and a spoon, sticky with stuff that looked like tar. The room was full of staring eyes. Perspiration gleamed on Graham's high forehead. He said thickly,
"That was close. You feel all right now?"
I'm all right.
Soft fingers touched Lawton's arm, and he jerked his head up, shrank from the soothing caress of Lois's hand. But she saw the sudden fear in his eyes, fear for her, and smiled reassuringly.
Father says there's no danger, dear. It's not contagious that way. He says you caught it because you were bitten by that thing in the swamp.
She pushed the hair out of Lawton's eyes, smoothed his brow.
Don't forget that Frank Mowry was with you and actually touched the thing, but he didn't get it.
He nodded slowly. Doubtless her father was right. If the disease were contagious in the usual manner, Graham himself would have contracted it, for in his role of physician he had attended to more than one victim. A bitter taste was in Lawton's mouth, and he licked his lips, realized that Graham had at least found some medicine which would temporarily check the agony. But the attack had left him weak, exhausted. He was only dully aware that Graham was talking in low tones to the men in the room. Why were these men assembled here at this hour of night? Lawton stared, bewildered. Ralph Kinney was here, looking frightfully pale and ill. Vincent Graham leaned against the back of a chair, gazing intently into his uncle's stern face. Ruddy-faced Sergeant Benson was present, with others who were high up in the police department. Frank Mowry had come, and other citizens of Rillwood. Where was Graham's wife? At such a gathering in her own home, it seemed strange that she should be absent.
That, gentlemen, is the whole story.
The words came throatily from Dr. Graham's thin lips.
The 3 known victims of the disease have mysteriously vanished from their homes, where they were under confinement. 2 new cases have been reported. One of those cases is my wife.
He clenched his hands and hunched himself forward in his chair.
I can save her, and I can save Lawton here. But unless we discover what has become of the others, they will die in agony. And we must learn the cause of this hideous plague, or Rillwood will be wiped out by it.
He paused, stared deliberately into the anxious faces about him.
Gentlemen, I think I have something to offer. You are all acquainted with my family history. It was common gossip for years. I had a brother, Raoul, who went too far into the dark side of medical research and was sentenced to life imprisonment for murder. Gentlemen, the fate of my brother is somehow connected with this new sequence of horrors. Every known victim of the Green Plague had some part in sending Raoul to prison.
Again, Graham paused, this time taking sufficient time to wipe beads of perspiration from his forehead.
Concentrate for a moment, gentlemen. We are a self-appointed committee of vigilantes, assembled here to think this thing through and then act on our conclusions. Who are the victims? First, Amos Cartwright, who vanished from his home 2 weeks ago and was seen by Lawton and Mowry in the swamp. He was the father of one of my brother's victims and had a direct path in sending Raoul to prison. Second, Andrew Gilvey, who was under my care until he vanished from his home this evening. He was a brother of Raoul's second victim and was equally responsible for the verdict of murder. Third, Mrs. Ralph Kinney, who before her marriage was a nurse in my brother's employ and produced vital evidence against him. Fourth, my own wife, for she and I both took the side of justice when we might have sought to defend a man whose soul was black with guilt. And there are others, all of them connected with Raoul's imprisonment. Do I make myself clear?
There was no immediate answer. Paul Lawton, staring, realized with a shudder that Dr. Graham had stumbled on a truth of frightful significance. The green horror was slowly, hideously wiping out all those who had taken part in Raoul Graham's downfall. That could mean only one thing. Raoul was not dead. The report of his death had been erroneous. He had returned to Rillwood after 8 years to carry out a plan of unholy vengeance. But those Indian arrows and the dark legends of the swamp, which had now become a terrain of horror peopled with uncouth, inhuman monsters. What possible connection could such things have with any preconceived campaign of revenge? What? Jonathan Graham was speaking again, and the throaty cadence of the words interrupted Lawton's wild thoughts.
I am aware, gentlemen, that suspicion may fall on my nephew Vincent. Being a son of Raoul, he is supplied with an adequate motive, and as he works in a pharmacy in close contact with drugs and medicines, he has had every opportunity to invent some terrible scourge and spread it among the people of Rillwood. But I ask you...
Graham's voice, stuck in his throat, was smothered under the vehement outburst of young Vincent as the boy lurched erect.
It's a lie! I didn't invent any drug. No one can blame me for a thing I didn't do.
No one is blaming you.
With a shrug, Graham turned again to his listeners.
Even I must be under suspicion. I am the brother of the man.
Again he stopped talking, this time so abruptly that the words seemed to melt on his lips. His gaze, roving about the room, had fixed on the face of his daughter. She was sitting on the arm of Lawton's chair, looking toward the largest of the room's windows. Her face was bloodless, her eyes bulging. Suddenly she flung herself up and back. Her arm, rigid from the shoulder, lashed up and pointed to the aperture.
Look! Oh, God, look!
Cry brought the room's occupants to their feet with the force of an explosion. Graham whirled, stood on taut legs. Paul Lawton forgot his illness and lunged erect. All eyes turned to the window at which Lois Graham had been staring. The one window where the shade was not fully drawn. That window was no longer an oblong of empty darkness. A gargoyle countenance was pressed against the glass, glaring in at the room's occupants. For an instant, the thing merely glowed there, a rotted corpse face from some vile hell beyond the pale of human knowledge. Lois Graham clung to Lawton's rigid body and moaned incoherently. Dr. Graham took a slow, awkward step forward as though intending to thrust out his trembling hands and hurl the window up in its grooves. But he stopped when the face changed expression before him. Iridescent eyes glowered balefully in their tubular sockets. Gaunt cheeks writhed about a cavernous mouth that widened in unholy lust. Then, with fantastic abruptness, a claw-like hand appeared beside the face. The hand swept forward. Window glass broke, cascaded to the carpet at Graham's feet. Through the jagged aperture whined a blunt, dark object that struck the doctor's chest and sent him gasping backward. The thing thudded to the floor, rolled, and lay still. The corpse face at the window was gone. For a moment, no man moved. It was Lawton who finally lurched forward and scooped up the thing on the floor. The thing in his fist was only a smooth, round stone, the size and shape of a billiard ball. But he had seen stones of that particular rust-red color before, in Blackwater Swamp. And to this one had been tied a folded oblong of paper, which, torn loose by the jagged window glass, lay now in a separate small bundle on the carpet. Lawton unfolded the paper slowly, while Graham and the others crowded around him. No man spoke. It was as though every man present realized the unseen menace that hung over them all. When the paper lay unfolded, Dr. Graham said hoarsely,
Good God, it's written in blood.
It was. The scarlet letters said hideously, This is a warning from the grave to those who helped send a man to his untimely death. You know my name. Know this also. The dead do return when they have learned the way back from hell. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Vengeance is mine. There is no escape. The living dead of Blackwater Swamp are my servants. Vengeance is mine. The paper slid from Lawton's icy fingers, would have volplaned to the carpet if another man had not clutched it.
Vengeance is mine.
The words came in a thick whisper from Jonathan Graham's lips and went sibilantly through the death-like silence of the room.
Great God! Raoul is alive. The report of his death was false.
He croaked the word alive with a queer restraint, and the wild look in his eyes betrayed the fact that he was thinking something else. His thoughts at last found utterance in words that were barely audible.
Alive? Perhaps he is not. Perhaps the grave has given up its own in the form of some horrible thing.
The words were drowned in a sudden scream of anguish. In the little group of assembled men, one man had been standing with his back toward the shattered window. Now that man rose on the tips of his toes, his face writhing, his gaping mouth releasing shriek after shriek of mortal agony. His corded arms writhed behind him, his hands clawed at something the rest could not see. They rushed forward toward him, but now the shrieking victim bent double, and a bloody groan rattled from his throat. He pitched forward on his face. Between his hunched shoulder blades protruded the shaft of a tufted arrow. An arrow similar to those which had impaled the naked victim in Blackwater Swamp. And the point of the weapon was embedded in his heart.
We hope you enjoyed Chapter 3 of A.I.R.T's production of By Night They Creep by Hugh B. Cave. If you would like more of this kind of story, please let us know in the comments.